So recently I heard about this thing in Australia where the Australian government and the various political figures, like news stations and whatever, are convinced that there's a wave of violence against women in Australia, even though there's not. One guy went off his meds, killed 6 people, 5 of them were women, and now because of that, US people are just like talking about violence against women, even though Australia is at a generational low about that. Like, it's a generational low. Literally. Like, for the last 30 years, every year, it's dropped and dropped and dropped. And dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. More and more and more and more. The percentage of murders per population, the share of murders in terms of the female gender, I think it's shrunk down to a quarter. Whereas, like 30 years ago, it was like a third of murders. Australia has one of the lowest murder rates on the planet, and when it comes to violence against women, or at least like primarily, it's people outside of Australia who are doing the most violence against women. In terms of violent relationships, it's mostly people outside of Australia. So there is this whole thing. This whole analysis, this paper by some guy, it is fundamentally not a thing. So I'm wondering, and I think that at some point Australia is going to have to deal with the Nick Cagening. The Nick Cagening, in my mind, would be this event where every Australian gets a bunch of pictures of Nick Cage so that they could subvert the government's new legislations if it passes, about forcing technology companies to make sure that the people accessing their stuff, social media, are adults. Which is, as everyone knows, utterly impossible, ridiculous, and moronic. But politicians just think technology is magic, so what the hell? Yeah, like, at some point, all of Australia, to my mind, will contain pictures of Nick Cage. And if pictures of Nick Cage are made illegal in Australia, I legitimately think that this might happen. How will Nick Cage survive in Australia without social media? I don't know. But the bigger point is, without social media, if by some miracle people don't Nick Cage themselves, how are the younger generations supposed to know when something is bullshit, something that the media is telling them is bullshit, if they don't have access to social media? Can someone explain that to me?